Hello, and welcome to the third in a series of lectures or talks from reflections on the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, verses 1 to 3. Please, if you haven't already, take a look at the introductory video, kind of lay out how this is working and what's going on here. That way we don't have to repeat it every single one of these videos. We can shorten them down a little bit. It would probably be better to see these in order, although it's not a necessity, but I'm reading them straight through from as they are written in the Gita. And so both the verses, the breakdown of the words, the reflections, the talks are ordered from the way that they appear in chapter 16. But, you know, whichever way works for you or not is up to you. Now, I pretty well always start off by mentioning the need to come to rest, take a break between activities. You can Google the School of Practical Philosophy. This is where I had learned this particular method, although many different schools and teachers offer the same advice, which is don't let things run on and this, and that's how you get to the point when you're 65 years old. You walk into the room and you don't know why you're there. It's because you have run your brain on high for too long without taking a little bit of a break in between. So without further ado, in whatever method you may have heard or known about, or if just to sit quietly, let's just come to rest before we begin. Good. So, ladies and gentlemen, according to my original plan of how I was reading through this, it was going to be one video per word or phrase. However, real life and the way things go, this is really a voyage of discovery going through this. I've not done any videos like this before. As I will say a lot of times during this is just my opinions based upon reflection of these words, and without repeating too much of the intro video again, although the Gita can be read in English, it is much more useful to read in Sanskrit. Most people don't daily read things in Sanskrit, so English will have to do. I was fortunate enough to have a number of teachers to get me started in it, at least enough to get through this. So what I have been doing is we read the verse, we read the words, I've been reflecting upon them, and when I feel like I'm ready to say something semi-useful, we get another one of these videos. Now, what happened in the last video, we were looking at Sattva Samsudhir, as it appears in phrasing, and which there's a lot, whenever you say translate, translating, the one thing I'm reminded of is I think it's Mandelbaum's translation of the Divine Comedy. He's got a beautiful introduction there saying, people think, well, I just translate, in this case, Italian to English, and gives just a beautiful example of one phrasing in there trying to translate out that to English. I leave you, again, you can get that at the library or what have you, I leave you to look that up, but in this particular case, something like the Gita needs reflection, because just saying Sattva Samsudhir, true essence together with purity, hardly does it justice. And so what happened in the second video is I kind of, the way this is I give a talk as I see it. I wait get a glass of water, what have you in between, and then see what questions arise. Now, I don't have an audience here. That's the best thing. But second best is listen to what was said and then see what questions come out of that. It's not even a difficulty. It's just that there is a richness. Well, as you can see, but I am a big fan of dessert. If I were to stand up, you'd see it even better. But some desserts, depends on where, and I've been fortunate enough to travel a little bit to get to different things. Some desserts are so rich that you really can only eat a little slice of this, okay? And in a way, and really in reality, the Gita and most of the Upanishads are very rich. They're very dense. It takes a while, and I think I've showed these before. I have not picked out my video editing program yet, but I'd like to be able to get the breakdowns into the videos so that you can see them. But it does take a while to pull apart the words. I'm not a great Sanskrit scholar by any means. I can kind of get by. But in order to do it, it just takes a while back and forth with the dictionary. Fortunately, technology has been great these days. So what happened was we were talking about true essence together with purity, which is also translated as pure of heart, pure in heart. And we were looking at really just some of the English definitions of this and got to talking about what would it mean to be dealing with your fellow humans truthfully, honestly, wisely, clean and pure. And after the first talk and reflection, it brought up certain things that I spoke about, but really realized that this is barely touching upon what these three phrases mean. And I think that where I'm going to go with this, other than a quick, right? Doesn't everybody take their sips of water? Wait, hold on. And we're going to have to edit that part out, okay? What I'm going to concentrate on is probably the word that nobody would, and that's psalm. And let me just again read the translation. With, together with, along with, together, all together, expressing conjunction, union, thoroughness, intensity, completeness. Now, as I put these things together myself, I also put my own notes in. That's the whole idea for me to have this so I've got something to read from you here, but I also get my own notes. And one of the things about psalm, especially with this kind of completeness of union, is that it wasn't simply and. In fact, in the next line, probably a few videos down, we'll see the use of cha, which is and. Apples and oranges, dogs and cats. This psalm is not that type of an and. And then the example that I used was of someone speaking about another person who was graceful, full of grace, normally applied, at least in the Catholic Church, to the Virgin Mary, Hail Mary, full of grace. But you don't have to go that far. I am sure that you know men, women who have this kind of quality of grace about them. And it's a wonderful quality to find in people because it is in them. And I think that's maybe where I'm going with psalm here and in them. I don't know. There's got to be a Real Housewives of every city, Beverly Hills, New York, Atlanta, what have you. But when I look at the commercials for that, I just cannot think. And many reality shows, quote, reality shows, have this, that there's a certain amount of phoniness and fakeness about it. And there's such a thing as putting on a good face in a difficult situation, and that is, at least again in my opinion, a helpful thing to do for those around you. Going back again to fearlessness and being a fearless leader is, think Churchill coming around, and visiting the people of London. That is, helping to lift, but pretending, that you are loving your fellow man. I don't think anybody is fooled by that. And going back to what we were saying about people having this quality, is when you come across, and I have been very fortunate to meet some incredible people who are just naturally, they're naturals, okay? Where if you're not happy by the time you got done talking, if you're not in a better state, the old check your pulse on this, it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I just hope that everybody who's listening, that's 2 people so far on this, that everybody who's listening has a chance to interact with someone who has these qualities, not as an add-on, as they would say in VS Code, put some add-ons into this program, but it is part and parcel of their being. They're not pretending to be good; they are good, and you don't have to be Mother Teresa for this to be your condition. I think that, and as they do each of these videos, not only had I reflected, but you're getting a reflection as we talk about this, maybe it's misnamed godly qualities or spiritual disposition. A lot of these words have meanings, and who knows what people think, but the fact of the matter is, I don't think any of the great teachers, religious masters, were intending to have their teachings be anything but what we as individuals are capable of. That it is almost always a pointing out, here's what these in this case of the Gita I'm working with here, here are these qualities. We'll call them godly, we'll call them spiritual, we'll list them, we'll see what they're about. But I do not believe, and I always repeat through here that these are my opinions, but I do not believe that it was meant to be and you don't get them. I mean, it'd be like opening up a bakery shop. We're back to desserts again. We're opening up a bakery shop and laying out the most beautiful cakes and pies and what have you, and saying, but you're not going to get them because they're not for you. I'm going to go with big heavy opinion on that one. I really, and kind of the point of these talks here, that this is an indication of how to live gracefully, truthfully, civilly, in harmony with your fellow human beings on this planet. So that when somebody gets to purity of being, purity of heart, it's no wonder why we needed a second video on it, because we're talking about, and I'm going still on the word Psalm here, we haven't gotten back to the other words, we are talking about this being your being, not sometime, not far away, not in the afterlife, not only the saintly people. I mean, if I was really wanting to go, why aren't you living a saintly life? Why aren't you imitating Jesus? Why aren't you looking, I mean, again, if you want to take the Christian path, go right ahead. If you were brought up Hindu, in fact, we're going to get to the recommendation that you kind of stick within, I mean, it says study of one's own scriptures, has some practical value. if you are in a place where you don't take out the pitchforks and what do they always have in the Frankenstein movies? There's torches and pitchforks, and try to burn down your neighbor's house because they're Hindu and you're Christian, then like the creation itself, there's beauty everywhere. There's truth everywhere. There's learning everywhere. It comes down to you. So I started off with the Gita because, as I said before, it's a very direct. It says these are godly qualities, and by the way, probably have some really practical advantages to you picking these up. And it's not just, and I guess, let me correct myself on that, it is not just picking up these qualities and going, hold on one second. This is, I think they all come up backwards in selfie mode, but this is the version of the Gita that I'm using, okay? If I flip it around the other way, it'll work. And it has its translation, and it has its view, what have you. But whatever those qualities are, those are instructions for you to take up. You do not need to wait, okay? If somebody, of course, what happens is you get to your deathbed and you go, oh, ran out of time, did we? And got to do these things. What I've seen so far, sorry, shuffling through the papers here, is that really we are talking about day-to-day living. And again, back to Psalm, in union, thoroughly, completely integrated into your being. It is your being, but as I said before, and I'm going to repeat again, we have a lot of junk covering everything up, and it's time to clean house. I guess I need the version of tidying up, whatever, the life-changing something or other of tidying up. This is an inner tidying up. I mean, your house could be gorgeous, you may not be a speck around it, but if nobody, if you walk down the street and people run to the other side because you're so unpleasant to be with, I think that it's time for a little inner tidying. And one way is suggested here of that your essence, that what shines forth from you is these qualities. And we talked about that in very, very practical terms the last time. Ask yourself, and I mean honestly, again, I'm just going to keep doing these for a while, but it's not so much that another guy on YouTube doing this. It's so that you ask yourself, am I doing this? Am I shining with light? Am I truthful? Am I wise? And if the answer is not, there's either I don't want to, I don't believe in it. We've talked about that before. Or I haven't started, and I would say to that, well, no time like the present, as the saying goes. But really what the reflections are about is for you to answer these questions for yourself, because the answer will be different. The truth stays the same. The wisdom, the honesty, the purity, that, and it will take a form for each of us. Each of us is different. But that underlying grace, that underlying civility, that underlying honesty and wisdom and care about everybody else who you're coming in contact with, that will come through, and people will love you for it. They may not, not going to come to your house, but it's that seeing those qualities. And as I read from the intro in there, Krishna is giving these godly qualities with the view to adopting them. Straightforward. This is like, hey, you could do this or you could do that. Your choice. I'm going to repeat the same thing. It's your choice. The only reason I'm here yapping away about this is that I don't see much of this being said out and about. There are some interesting websites. There are organizations such as the School of Philosophy. There are people who run ashrams in India. There are people who do all sorts of good works here in America. But sometimes I think it gets drowned out, in our day-to-day needing to either make a living, take care of the kids, make the car payments, the house payments, and what have you. There's a certain amount of activity just to keep the bodies going here, and just to keep everybody fed, and just to be able to get to work and stuff like that. And that's not in any way to deny that. The question is that so, have you been so consumed by that, or has it so weighed you down that nothing else is possible? And some people would say yes, my life is, and there are some very difficult things that people are going through, as we sit here. It's not to take away from that. The question is whether that's there or not, or is the only way that you're living a charmed life, is that the only way for these qualities to manifest in yourself? My opinion is no. I think that circumstance, difficult as it may be, should not be the ruling factor. Now, I hardly wait to see some of the comments on that. Well, yeah, you didn't have it. And it may be true. On the other hand, nobody knows what anybody else's story is. You don't know what my story is. I don't know what your story is. It may be wonderful for both of us, not wonderful. The question and what the reflections and what we're talking about in purity and heart of being is it, do circumstances of life prevent you from being truthful, honest, pure, clean dealing with people? I'm going to think the third verse brings that subject up in a slightly different manner of how we deal with our fellow human beings here. So again, I thought it was worth coming back and taking a look at Sattva Samsut here, not for the being or the purity, but for the idea that this is not a put-on mask, but that it has been incorporated into your being in such a way that it would be pretty well impossible for you to lie or steal or cheat or any of the other things which we convince ourselves are so necessary in these modern days. Again, the phrases are numerous that people have for denying this, and what I'm putting out here is that true? Must I lie? Must I cheat? Must I stomp my fellow human being down in order for me to succeed? And that's a very real question for people. And my answer is no, and we'll continue to look at why I don't think that. But if you feel that's necessary, even if you do think that way, is there any harm in trying it the other? Or is there any benefit, even if you personally don't, which is a whole other branch of this, looking out for number one? What happens? Do you have enough strength that even if everything in life goes against you, you still remain truthful and honest and upright? Again, I'm not saying that any of these little lectures are going to answer that. I'm saying that those are questions that I think might be useful for any human on this planet to ask themselves. With that, and looking at the timer here, I'm going to leave it. I'll come back and see what came of this, and I think that'll do it for the time being on true essence together with purity or purity of heart. But let's take our quick break. I'll look over some of this material again and see if there's anything else to be said on this subject without kind of beating it to death. Okay, we'll be back for part 2 shortly. Welcome back. We're in part 2 of this video, still looking at purity of heart, purity of being. And we just finished the first half, having concentrated on the conjunction, the union, the thoroughness of being and purity. And what I do in between these is I read the items that I've got over again, think about what was just said, and see if any questions or what pops up from it. And then again, all of this is kind of as is. Not to say that I haven't done the studying ahead, but it's kind of like well, the old joke is, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. It's not like you don't do the practice. So it took me a couple of months to get, this is only 3 verses, took a couple of months to get this together, although it's part of that was spent in just marveling at how much Sanskrit technology is out there these days. Made my life a lot easier, but as with any software, you have to get used to it. For how these are done, no matter how much time I've put in and how much dictionary reading and putting this all together and making sure I've got it technically accurate, ultimately, yeah, so you practice and you got to Carnegie Hall, but the minute that, and let's say you're a piano player, the minute that you're up there on that stage and you start playing your first piece, you cannot be, the practice time is over. It's get out there and perform. And so there may be a lot of preparation, just like when a building is built, not far actually from Carnegie Hall. I used to work in New York City. Not far from Carnegie Hall was a big empty hole for a couple of years. Well, it's not like it was sitting there. There's a lot of prep work to do. But ultimately the day comes when the first beams show up and they start building the building. And that's sort of what I'm saying about these videos and why I have to listen to them to see what's said, is because, yeah, there's a lot of prep work, but this is the performance, people. This is like, okay, so what did we get from all that prep work? What does it sound like? And as I say again and again, this is my opinion, my reflections, what I've seen from it. Your mileage may vary, as the saying goes, but these are definitely, this is after the, if you will, the homework was done. And I say all of this as introduction. One, it's good so that you know where this comes from. But two, what happened was I went to the bottom of the page where I'm looking at the root of purity, and it says to be cleared or cleansed or purified, become pure. And all I could think of was a mud run. And for those of you who don't know, I think there used to be, well, there's still on marathons and runs and stuff, and then somehow or another, whether it's obstacle course or something that comes from the military, these mud runs or tougher courses came in. And so I looked at clear and I thought of the mud runs, which in one way doesn't make any sense, but really where that led to is the creation itself and the limited way that we tend to look at it. And again, I'm jumping into other things that I'm working on, but one of the difficulties is we tend to take things really flat and dull and boring at the physical level only. And so I always want to make sure that as I present my understanding of this, that it is understood that a human being is, if you will, not multidimensional, as in, a universe with 11 dimensions or whatever string theory says or something like that, but that we have what we call the physical, all of this stuff here. You have the mental level, which a lot of people think is just right there, and then the causal level, or the level of heart, which is a subject that I'm not even going to tackle at the moment, but that this, reading it, the phrase that I have heard is the purpose of art is to open the hearts of those for whom no other way is possible. Other way is possible, scriptures, service, love of their fellow human beings, what have you. If none of that, and I'm, aside from the people who just hear me talking and flip right to the next video, aside from that, there are some people who are downright, totally, and that's their rights to disagree, totally disagreeing with any of this sort of stuff, saying that that's not the way that it is. We're going to have to pause for a second here. But the fact of the matter is, we are talking about a purity of being that is not just, I wash my hands for 20 seconds because of coronavirus. I keep my house clean because I don't want ants in it. We're talking about running through purity of being and purity of mind and purity of heart. And in fact, since we tend to kind of have things a little bit backwards in our day-to-day thinking, it's actually the opposite way through. You start with a pure heart, which would lead to generally purer thoughts, which leads to purity around you. Okay, but that again is a broader subject. But I just want to be clear that anything so far that I have seen in this is not necessarily applying only to the physical level. It's sort of like, what is, again, it's questions for you to reflect upon. What is the effect of this? What is its use? What does it do? And how? Because, I could sit here and spew out all sorts of stuff, and you can read all sorts of things, and the question is how? Well, the first is, which is why I think it was translated as purity of heart, is that you bring into your heart, or your treasure chest, for the biblical among you, you bring in there, where you get that, you clean a house there first. And because that is the inner and that's where everything flows out of, the rest kind of clears. It's sort of like if you have a lake that's being polluted by some factory, you may have to clean up the ducks and the geese, at the lake, but what you really need to do is find out the factory that's putting the pollution in and go, as it were, upstream for a human being being the level of heart. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand, and I am ignoring the higher levels within each of us. It's just that for most people, there's not even an awareness that we are more than our physical bodies. Again, a whole other subject which I may or may not delve into. That's probably a touchy one for most people, so we'll leave it at that. But since we are working in chapter 16 of the Gita, and since it has been brought up as purity of heart, I felt that it was useful to say something about where one performs, where one starts with this cleansing, if you were not already. And I would say, including myself, there's probably a bit of cleansing that needs to be done. But it's there, it's for consideration, and that really is the whole of what all of these little videos are about. So rather than go on any longer here, let's just kind of bring this back to a close, that we were looking at sattva being your reality, your disposition, your consciousness, your being, okay? And the qualities of sattva, and we more or less focused for a good portion of this on these qualities rendering a person true, honest, wise, etc., or a thing pure and clean. And at least I concluded, again, you may not, that it'd be really nice if anybody you dealt with, I just say, I always use the car example because I think for most people, if I go by the commercials on TV, most people feel like if anybody could point to dishonest people on the planet, it's people selling cars. I think there's probably some truth in it. I don't know why cars in particular bring out that quality in people, but here it is. But boy, wouldn't it be nice to walk in, house buying, car buying, grocery buying, going to a restaurant, what have you, to have people who were upright, truthful, and honest and dealing with you. I mean, it'd be a pleasure, wouldn't it? So we concentrated on that a bit because I thought, at least in my opinion, that that's probably something most of us would like to see happen, be in a yearning. And although there's a lot of other counter thoughts to that out there, so what? That's another thought. You could take that road, you could take that road. Suggestion is life might be easier if you take the road of the godly qualities. At least that's what is being put forth here. So I'm going to leave it at that for now, and hopefully I've put these things together into some sort of coherent form and get them up onto YouTube, and we'll see what happens from there. And just to look ahead a little bit, haven't done that one yet. Where are we at? We are at next. What are we going to start talking about? Jnana Yoga coming up. Okay. Yeah. Another interesting one. We'll see what happens with that. So until the next video, thank you for your attention if you're still with us. And just remember, if you don't like this, there's plenty of cat videos out on the internet.